Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in an exciting webinar on the People Challenge of PCI Compliance, leveraging the technology stopgap. Today, it's my pleasure to be introducing two very special guests. They will be helping us better understand this under-recognized issue. Our first panelist today is guest speaker Heidi Shea, Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Heidi has been with Forrester since 2006, where her current research primarily focuses on data security and privacy strategy, skills development, policies, and related technology controls. In her role, she guides clients in applying a zero trust, data centric approach to securing data, advising them in sensitive areas like sensitive data discovery and classification, data loss prevention, secure communications, and more. Heidi is also a certified information system security professional, or CISSP. Our second panelist today is Chris Pinn, VP of Security and Privacy at PKWARE. In this role, Chris drives value and awareness for all PKWARE customers regarding the various challenges that both privacy and security regulations bring to the data-driven world. He closely works with all customers and potential customers to help them better understand how PKWARE solutions can best fit into their environments and processes. He also works very closely with many other departments such as sales, marketing, partners, and product to help build brand awareness and product insights. Before I hand it over to our speakers, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute, but you may submit questions at any time during the webinar by using the questions window in your GoToMeeting control panel. We will answer as many of these questions as we can at the end of the session. We are also recording this webinar, and we will send you an email with a link to the recording as soon as that's available. And with that, let's go ahead and get started with today's presentation.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Heidi here. Thanks for joining, and thanks for having me on this webinar to the PKWARE team. So if we think about what's been happening in recent memory with new opportunities today, things like digital transformation, for example, with companies moving to sell more of what they do online, whether that's selling directly to the customers or perhaps moving onto the mobile web and having mobile apps as a way of reaching new markets, new customers as well. It really changes how we start to think about things like customer interactions and the whole shopping experience. But with these new opportunities, like digital transformation, also come new risks when it comes to compliance, security, privacy. Same when we think about things like the great resignation and the great reshuffle, people leaving jobs, moving into new jobs, looking for new roles. It's an opportunity for companies to really think about how exactly are their employees getting work done today outside of an office environment. It's an opportunity to think about how to attract and retain talent who might be working remotely from anywhere in different locations. However, with this also comes new risks. It's staffing shortages in the meantime as people are going through this reshuffle. It also exposes some potential knowledge gaps, gaps in institutional knowledge within organizations as you have people leave. And so, with this change in how employees are working, how businesses are operating, it really opens up a lot more questions about data. There's more data in different places, as well as some more unknowns. So, if you think about how work gets done, this could be remote work practices, different types of environments that your employees are now in. It could involve use of different types and new types of collaboration and communication tools. And so if I think about the kinds of questions I've been fielding and addressing for Forrester clients over the last year, 2 years, I think the issue goes beyond having just more files saved on a laptop when someone is working from home. I mean, that is certainly still a concern, but it's also different kinds of inquiries, different questions that now stem from issues around just growing data volumes, different data types. Think of your unstructured data, your files, as a new type of vulnerability. So for example, if we're looking at things like uh, video conferencing, Zoom calls, virtual meetings, a lot of times today, these things they're getting recorded, like this webinar today. These things are recorded, they may be transcribed. So now you have to think about, well, who gets to access? this type of material? How long will you keep this around for? What was the content that was actually recorded? And is that sensitive? So that's a new thing to consider, a growing thing to consider. It's also about the different kinds of roles, employees who may be working from home who previously did not and have access to sensitive data in their role. So I fielded some questions around things like call center employees working from home and some of the conditions and concerns that companies had with how they were handling information, handling data in that environment. So in other cases, you had customers that were trying to do things like email their payment info to salespeople over email, and companies were asking, well, how do we stop that, prevent that from happening? Because now that's a new risk, and you have this information sitting in somebody's inbox. So that's one aspect of this concern. The other angle is, well, how data gets used. So this could be things like internal data analytics types of initiatives. It could be external data collaboration and sharing. So I see companies really questioning data use within their organization and bringing up concerns of unknowns like, well, what do they have in their data lakes? What's gotten dumped into those lakes? What might be some copies of data that employees are now making for analytics purposes, for customer insights, for example? Where is this data living at this point in time? And then there may also be initiatives around data collaboration with third-party partners. And so this all opens up questions about, well, how do we control all of this data? And what do we need to think about when it comes to things like compliance uh, and our obligations on that front? So this is where I think discussion of PCI can come up as well. 4.0, version 4.0 is coming. And this is something that companies really need to prepare for. It's new, it's on the way. The last update to this was back in 2018, and that was already some minor updates, and there was a bigger update just years and years prior to that. So this is, I think, the first real major update we've seen in many, many years. And this is the timeline that uh, is put out for PCI 4.0. And it might seem like it's a long way off in terms of the time you have in order to comply and to meet these new requirements. But the reality is that it goes by fast. And if you're going to have a hope of trying to get as far as you can, the time to start is really now to start thinking about this. And so with this new update, there are four key high-level goals that have been put out for, well, why and what's going on with this update. And they're pretty straightforward because you want to be able to ensure that the standard meets the security needs of the payments industry overall. So I think that's expected. Adding flexibility, support of additional methodologies to achieve security, which I think it's welcomed, but also something to really take note of, because I think in the past, some of the things that people have really loved about PCI is how prescriptive it is. It says you do this, and so you go forth and do it. And that had its pros and cons, as we've seen with other regulations, other types of compliance requirements that give you that kind of flexibility to make your choices. Then another key goal here is to promote security as this continuous process, which I think is fabulous. It's overdue here. You really have to think about it as this ongoing thing, not just this one-time thing that you do just to check the boxes and pass an audit. And then enhanced validation methods, procedures, which I think is also a worthy goal here as well, and so something to look forward to. And so things to take away from this as we start thinking about this update and what it means is this increased flexibility. It does not mean that there's less work you have to do to comply with it. I mean, some of the key words to really hone in on this is to do with flexibility, continuous process, enhanced validation. So there's going to be room for companies to take a new customized approach, which is great because you can start to focus on the intent of each requirement and less about, you have to do X this really specific way. You get to choose your own approach, but you also have to now show the evidence, the documentation, the reasoning behind it. What are you doing to satisfy the intent of these requirements? So that takes a bit of work. We've also
Yeah,
seen this. Oh,
I would add here too, Heidi, the customized approach, right? It can be a breath of fresh air if you look at it in a certain light, meaning that you can really use this opportunity to differentiate your security controls from your neighbor, right? If you're a bank or you're a retailer, what makes you, secured but secured differently than the next retailer? Because if they get breached, you don't want the same attack being used on your systems and getting breached as well because you were secured in the same manner. So this really lets you lets you and your team think about different ways to secure the environment that may separate you from the competition, quite frankly.
oh, yeah, that's a fantastic point, Chris. I would agree there. It also, I think, allows companies to really look at their own environment and what might be some of the differences, the nuances that they have to account for when they're thinking about the controls they put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about you mentioned on the previous slide, it's kind of it was a stab at the security by design and default, which we've seen come up in recent years in all these privacy regulations that everybody's having to deal with. And I think this is really the PCI Council's way of not getting left behind, right? They don't want privacy to be done by design and default and not security. The two, privacy and security, kind of need to be done hand in hand.
Hmm. Absolutely. And when we think about how we do that, I think the foundation really is about understanding, well, what is it that you're trying to protect and identifying what that is. So this is where I see things like data discovery, classification really taking center stage with any approach that an organization is going to take. And so this is just an overall highlight of the state of what I'm seeing today. In Forrester's data, we've seen that 74% of enterprises tell us that they've implemented data discovery and classification technology. This this is an interesting figure when I first saw it because it's like, oh, that's great, right? 74%. At the same time, it feels a little bit high, uh, and I think that just because it's these are capabilities that you see in a lot of different places today. Different solutions have this as a feature. So you might have an organization that is, yes, they have implemented, they're using this, but perhaps it's not company wide. Maybe it's only within a group or a smaller context of what they're trying to achieve. So that's just something to bear in mind when we see stats and figures like this. There's also an abundance of options on the market today. So lots of products, feature capabilities, but they're not all made equal. How I like to think about this is that it's kind of like the utensils that you're getting with your food when you order a meal for takeout. It's coming with it, but sometimes it's kind of flimsy. It might be difficult to use. Maybe you don't want to use that because of that. Other times it's pretty well made. It's sturdy. It does the job. Sometimes you get a fork, knife, and spoon. Other times you might just get a fork. So it's not all built equal, even though you might see this capability exist in different tools. So you really have to evaluate and assess, well, what is it that you're actually getting? And is it going to fit your needs? Automation, also a game changer in this space. I think it's a must have, just given the volumes of data that an organization is dealing with and the abundance of places where you might have this data located. And then technology alone is insufficient. So I always have to point this out. It's about what you do after you discover and classify your data. So the processes, the policies, the procedures that you have just wrapped around all of this and making sure that it's documented and repeatable for your company. Whether you consider things like your data's useful life cycle, what your retention policies may be, these are all important components to ensure that you have in place as a part of your approach and your strategy for identifying, well, what controls do you need next? And so that's the key. It's the what's next. What comes after doing this discovery, this classification as your foundation? You could tackle data sprawl. And you can think of that about this in two tracks. One is about creating policies and guidance for remediation, the what happens next. So this could be you're deleting data you no longer need. It could be about notifying users, data custodians about this data, where it's located, maybe asking questions about it. Does this still serve a business purpose? Is this where it's supposed to be? And if it's not, then moving it to the appropriate controlled locations, maybe adjusting access permissions if that's necessary, and then implementing different kinds of controls on that data upon discovery. Another track here is about consolidating your data. So this earlier point about data getting replicated, copies all in different places, you can do a bit of cleanup. Have it exist in fewer places to limit your exposure, and if possible, reduce your scope for different compliance requirements like PCI. And then we have controls. So there's an abundance of options to consider today. And sometimes I feel like I encounter this sentiment that, DLP is the answer to everything, but it's really not. I mean, you see DLP everywhere, and it can certainly be a part of that approach, but data security is so much more than that. Different things that you could implement depending on the type of data, the environment, and what you're trying to achieve. And this was just some data points that we had from a recent survey around security about data types that are potentially compromised in the last 12 months. So personally identifiable information tops the list of compromised data types, but you can see that there's a lot of variety here. The range and the scope of sensitive data that an organization needs to protect is pretty vast.
Yeah, and I think you and I were just talking the other day, Heidi, about these numbers, and again, I think it depends on whom or which part of the world you're talking to, right? A lot of the data numbers here are broken out, whether it's card numbers or it's intellectual property or it's protected health information, right? Arguably, depending on who you're talking to, that could all be PII or PI. But the really alarming number here is the authentication credentials, because we all know if you lose your credentials, you've pretty much lost your environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, someone with the credentials, they just get right in. They don't need to resort to other means or to work harder, I guess, if the front door is open.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then also when it comes to what firms are doing to improve compliance, this is also some interesting takeaways as well. I think the top thing that people are doing is really investing in expanding their use of technology to help augment and support these efforts. And you can see that there are certain people-related things here too. Things like enhancing their training and awareness efforts. I think that can certainly go a long way. Things like improving company culture. This is specifically culture around security and privacy. So having that as a basis, I think, is helpful because you're lifting up everybody's data awareness and their security awareness as a whole. And that will go down into how they behave, how they handle data in their everyday, day-to-day jobs. But lower on this list is this point about hiring additional employees, which I thought was interesting. And it makes sense given today's environment, right? Technology, it doesn't replace people. It augments their efforts, but you really cannot hire your way to compliance. That's very difficult to do. And so also when we think about things like compliance efforts, the beauty of it is that it's not just this one-time deal or a one-off effort. Comply with PCI, and you can start to map these efforts to different requirements, different things that you may be doing as an organization, different frameworks that you're following or trying to also follow as well. So this is just a sample of some of the work Forrester's done in the past of mapping PCI for retail, for a retailer, to other requirements like ITIL or a zero trust approach to security. And so you'll notice that there are some commonalities between these things. So you may be further along with your efforts than you think when you start to look at it from this perspective. And then you can see how data classification is this constant that goes across all of it, because knowing your data is a really common requirement here. Yep. And then another common requirement is that you really need people to support and to enable your efforts here. But this is where it starts to get challenging today, because in this environment, you've got turnover, That's increasing. You've got people who are considering quitting their jobs in the next couple of months. But it's also not just turnover. Even though the people who are remaining, who stay, they might be taking time off, whether that's due to burnout or child or elder care needs today, or illnesses, whether it's their own or family members. So these are just some of the challenges that the companies will have to tackle as they move along with compliance.
Thanks for that, Heidi. So, just coming off of what Heidi just said about employees, maybe less engaged due to personal reasons, or maybe you have staff turning over. The real core of it is, from a management standpoint, you have to think about, well, how do I keep my employees engaged? One, I want to reduce turnover, and two, I want to reduce burnout, right? So as we head into the next few slides, I'll dive in a little bit of how technology and different procedures and different ways of thinking can assist with that. So, the first thing that a lot of employees, and shifting from the office to home, and quite frankly, this was even happening in the office. There was a lot of repetitive tasks. There always has been in business, that too often you see teams basically select an employee, maybe two employees, to say, all right, you're going to be doing you're going to be doing security remediation, or you're going to be our daily reporting guy, and you're going to give us a monthly or a morning update, right? And uh, having those individuals give the update, that may be fine. But having those individuals go fetch all of the data used to populate those updates or those reports is not okay. Right? You're going to cause the employee to burn out. It's just not good. So really, the highlight here is when you're dealing with day-to-day remediation. If you know credit cards, as an example, in system A must be encrypted, or they must be masked or redacted, it's a standard control that's always applied. Right? Why not automate that? When data is found in this section, encrypt it. There's technologies out there today that can do this via policies, and anytime they see it, it just happens, right? We're all used to DLP, and it's similar, but DLP is not, as we all know, DLP is not that great at finding data accurately, which poses its own challenge. The second bullet here, I kind of touched on already, is the on-demand and automatic reporting and data monitoring, right? None of these tasks does a normal employee want to be doing on a daily basis. If you assign somebody to basically report and monitor on what data is in your commerce database on a daily basis, chances are that employee's not going to be around very long, because they don't really feel valued, and they're definitely not being challenged. Then the third bullet here is increasing the employee, how valuable is your employee's time? How much value are you getting from them? So if you're having them do what essentially a bot could do, you're not really getting much value. And I'll talk about this a little bit in a slide I have coming up. It's really the idea of having your employees do what you hired them for, right? You hired them to be creative, to be pioneers, to be able to push your organization to the next level of security, the next level of architecture, right? Modernize the environment, make things easier, make it faster. That's really what you hired these employees for, not to become a bot. And then lastly, we've all dealt with internal audit, we've all dealt with assessments or external audits. And how do we reduce the manualness that's incorporated in a lot of these, I don't want to call them daily tasks, because hopefully you're not getting audited on daily, but how do you make your audits as easy as possible? And it really is through the use of technology, having better monitoring, having better better tool sets at your fingertips for not just your IT team, but also for your internal audit and your compliance and privacy teams across the organization as well, so that they take less questions to your DBAs and your sysadmins, not to burden the day-to-day business, if you will. So, as Heidi was mentioning, right, data discovery is useful in so many different ways. Um, and here, focused on the people element, right, it really raises your employees' awareness as to what data they have where, so that they can do things like, better use of security controls. Just because you have encryption capabilities doesn't mean you should go encrypt everything, right? I mean, that's some companies' philosophy, but it's costly, not just in dollars, but it's costly to system resources. It's costly to business access time, and it's just it has a huge overhead. You wouldn't mask all of your data because it wouldn't be useful. You wouldn't redact it all, again, because it's not necessary. So understanding what data you have, where helps you um, really ask the harder question to your business teams. Why do we have the data, right? Start capturing the intent and once you have the intent, then you can start asking legal and privacy, how long must we keep this data, or how long can we keep this data? What is our legal obligations, and what's the legal limits, if you will? Um, as well as quality data analytics. So if you want to assist your marketing team or your business teams to really extract more value from the data that they are rightfully collecting, um, that nothing helps more than data discovery in this area. Same could be said for enhanced marketing. There's a big push not to profile, customers, and you see a lot of those regulations coming out of the EU and various wording. But really creating a profile about a person it's becoming frowned upon, if you will. But how can we do the most we can with the data that we've captured with the legal intent, if you will? And marketing kind of gets pushed by the wayside because it's not in most people's eyes, marketing is not a quote unquote required activity, right? It's an aid to the business. And so again, being aware of what data you have, where and why it's there really lets you do the most you can with it. I spoke a little bit about reducing employee burden, and I can recall back to when I was a system engineer, and the things I would get tasked with, it would sometimes just blow my mind. um, it's this idea of pioneers and innovators versus bots. Just managing users in Active Directory is a great example. You can script most of that, and once scripted, build some jobs and let's move on. But oftentimes, even though a script exists, employers still have personnel, instead of auditing or monitoring those scripts, they still have personnel performing the jobs. So try to step away from things like that. um, right. The other thing is with data discovery and starting to turn your employees back to this pioneer mentality. Right. What you're going to see come out of it is increased creativity. Right. People are going to feel a lot more free in your internal meetings to bring up ideas that maybe they're good, maybe they're not good. Right? Not everyone's going to be a winner, but I like to say, the only bad idea is the one not mentioned. So, um, getting your employees out of the trenches so that they can really start to enjoy their jobs is going to increase that creativity. It's going to, assist with employee retainment because now they feel like they're part of a team. Their options are unlimited as to what they could bring to the table, and they don't feel like they're just a number, right? They also start to begin feeling like the work that they're doing is rewarding because what they're doing for your organization, they may not be able to do in a different organization. Or if an employee comes in, a brand new employee comes in from a different sector or a different, maybe they came in from one of your competitors, they can bounce ideas. Hey, this is what we used to do over there. But then your organization might say, yep, that's the old school. We're doing the new school way. We're doing it this way. So they just feel a lot more rewarded whenever they're challenged and accepted for their new ideas. Along with that comes increased attention to detail because they're, quite frankly, they're just more involved, right? When people want to do something and they're excited to do it, the quality of work is gonna skyrocket.
And
If
this
we
is
go
so
ahead.
important. Like I just feel like it's people who want their jobs to have meaning, right? And they want to make sure that they are contributing in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll sidetrack here for a moment. A true story. I did many years with the government. And when I made the shift from government work into, I call it the real world, um, I remember I went to work for like 2 weeks and I went in and I told my boss at that point, I said, I can't do this anymore. And he told me, he's like, well, Chris, you do great work. Like, what's going on? You're getting paid, right? And I told him, of course I'm getting paid, but I don't have a reason to come to work, right? I'm making a rich guy richer. I'm like, there's no purpose behind what I'm doing here. Um, so me and him really had a heart to heart, and it came down to really finding, what inspired me, what made me want to come to work. And for me, it was really a purpose beyond money. It was, for me, it's all about securing people's data that you wouldn't, normal day-to-day employers, they don't necessarily think of data as personal, but coming from the government, I do, right? So everybody's data is important because, quite frankly, you don't know that person from the next person. They could be a general, they could be, government, or they could have some super secret job or something. You just don't know. So you have to treat them all equally. And so that's ultimately where my career and all of this stuff started. So Heidi mentioned business or employee turnover, right? Which brings a lot of challenges to it. We can go to the next slide here, Mark. With employee turnover, losing an employee always stinks, right? No one likes to see their employees go. But with employees leaving, you're losing a lot of knowledge. Another conversation I had, this goes to pay raises, right? So I don't know if we have any any managers listening, but if we do, like, what's more costly, right? Giving that employee who has internal knowledge of the systems and in the processes and the skeletons in the closet, right, so to speak. What's more costly, giving them their 3 or 5% raise, or letting them go, losing that information, and then hiring somebody new to backfill them that you're probably going to hire for 20 or 30% more? Um, right. This is a battle that all employees face year over year. Quite frankly, it's why a lot of people leave. And all it does is it hurts your team because you're losing the knowledge, you're losing the experience, and it lowers your team morale um, because they feel like they're next, or they start to doubt the organization. It's like, oh, they didn't help him, they're not going to help me. Uh, Maybe we're not doing a good job, right? All these kind of things start running through their head, which really, even just for your team, it lowers the morale. But then when external teams start to see it, right, you start losing confidence from other teams. So if you're a commerce team and you're shrinking in size, and then you have somebody like an infosec team looking at you, they start losing confidence in your commerce team, thinking, oh, they're probably not doing the right thing. So now we're going to increase audits. We're going to start checking on them more. And ultimately this all just it crumbles. It's a big snowball effect, I like to say, which starts to break into procedural work. Even that whole concept of pioneers versus bots. Well, you lose that, and you really don't want to. We could go to the next one. So again, this concept goes back to data discovery and automated remediation, if you will. Employees are going to leave. It's inevitable. It's part of business. um, but data discovery can help reduce some of that internal knowledge loss. Again, because you're at this point you're leveraging a bot, right? The bot's not going anywhere. It will be around as long as you keep paying the bill. Um, and then if we think about that employee turnover from just take a compliance person's perspective, and you're going through year over year PCI assessments, that compliance person that got you your rock last year knows you're not 100% compliant. Frankly, I don't know many organizations that are, but you have methods of either hiding the skeleton in the closet, or the old methodology of a compensating control, right? They have a fix for said skeleton, but that's normally all like personal knowledge. It's all in that guy's head, and if you lose that compliance person, their methodology or their means of talking around or working around that skeleton in the closet might be very different than the next compliance person you hire. Not saying the new hire is not good, but it's just a different mentality, a different method of working, and a different level of risk acceptance, if you will. Your new employee might need everything to be perfect, right? And we all know in IT things are rarely perfect. so, so these are all, things we want to avoid, and we can help avoid some of this, uh, some of this just knowledge in people's heads if we begin to leverage data discovery and automatic remediation. Um, in addition, right, it does things like reduce employee burnout so that people aren't leaving. I talked a little bit about the continuous awareness throughout turnover. Again, the knowledge doesn't go to a person. Even if the person learns said knowledge, they learned it from an automated system. Security never stops, right? With personnel, they've got to sleep at some point. They can't be eyes on glass all day. So leveraging a software to do this for you ensures that while the attackers are awake and your team isn't, you're still secured. And then again, back to that idea of pioneers versus bots, right? More time for employees to focus on projects. And quite frankly, in the world we're in today, more time for employees to focus on their family and their work-life balance. Um, and at the end of the day, really, it builds increased confidence in your team, which as an external factor to that, it builds increased confidence, throughout other teams, seeing your team be successful. Especially if you're dealing with the infosec relationship. If infosec sees teams being successful, the audits start to become less and less. The trust between teams gets greater, and the overall product that you're delivering is higher. So, we've talked a lot about the people problem and PCI and various regulations, but taking a step back here, what is or who is PKWARE, right? So we've been around for many, many years at this point, but our product today really focuses on that automatic data discovery, classification, remediation, and various methods of protection, whether it's masking, encryption, redaction, albeit if it's in structured, unstructured systems, or if it's on-prem or in a cloud, or maybe it's in multiple clouds. Our focus really is to be able to provide that end-to-end solution from desktop to tablet to all the way back to the server. So depending on your challenge, there's a chance we can probably help. If we go into the next slide here, we'll dive into the product just a little bit. Again, the intention here isn't to be a sales webinar, but you may, as we go to the next slides, understanding these terms will help a little bit. And so if you see or hear the term PK Protect, that's what we call our product. And our product is a culmination of the 5 capabilities you see below. So everything kind of builds off of the discovery aspect, going out and finding where the data is. That way we can start to talk about, well, based on the location that we found it, based on the type of data that it is, should we mask it? Should we encrypt it? Is it in scope for privacy? Is it not? And then ultimately as well, classify it. And all of our, products combined really allow us to have that data-centric security approach. Leveraging something like PKWare ensures that you're applying the correct protections based on where and what the data is. Just as an example I used earlier, you wouldn't want to encrypt everything because it's going to hinder your business. So let's find your the golden keys, if you will, your crown jewels. Let's protect those. Let's protect the super sensitive information, whether it's credit cards or it's names or it's addresses, whatever it is, right? Let's find that. Let's find out, and let's go use the correct protections on it. One example I used to really get over to marketing and some other folks I was doing some training on is, let's say that you pay a painter to paint your house, but you know, he comes out the next morning and he paints your neighbor's house, right? He did his job. He painted the house the color, but he did it on the wrong house. So, and that can happen with security. Like you can go encrypt data, but if you're encrypting the wrong data, what's the point? You actually ruined your neighbor's day, right? Because you probably didn't paint his house the color he wanted, and then you wasted your money and you wasted your time. So that's what we want to avoid here. Um, along with this, right, you can build better security policies and enable the enforcement of said policies uh, more easily. It's no longer a manual assessment or manual audit. It comes down to a quick report. Is this applied? Is it not applied? If it's not applied, let's go have a conversation. Um, and then lastly, right, reduce technology and human overhead because you're using technology smartly and you're not burning your staff out. So we talked a little bit about these already. I'll quickly get through this. So some of the advantages of automated data security, and this is focused back on the PCI lens, is, and I think I actually have a drawing coming up, but if everything is policy driven, right, through an automated method, when data discovery discovers something that is somewhere it shouldn't be, that policy can go ahead and take the appropriate action. If it's just reporting, then it will report on it. If it's masking, it will mask it. If it needs encrypted, it'll do that. It's also non-disruptive, right? You didn't have to uh, remove an employee from their day-to-day work or from their engineering work or whatever they were doing to go back and fix something that should have already been, secured, and then user-proof as well. So, meaning you're not reliant on that user. You're not going to run into human error, which we're all prone to, and you're not going to have that issue where data gets stored somewhere at midnight when a job ran and it wasn't secured because a person didn't do it, right? Allow your automation to take care of that. So here, talking about the business benefits of the approach. All right, we talked a little bit about technology and all of that. From a business concept, scalability is always a problem. Um, from a human resource standpoint, if you're using a person, well, there's only 8 hours in a day, right? And maybe a few extra if you're paying them overtime, but a person eventually needs to stop. They've got to go relax and rest. Um, their skill sets may also vary. Not every IT person out there knows every platform. Leveraging automated technologies such as PKWARE allow the hard work has been done, I like to say. Leveraging data discovery across all these various platforms kind of levels the playing field. It reduces uh, the knowledge that a lot of your IT team must have in order to performing encryption, as an example, on a Linux box or on a DB2 system versus a file share, right? It's two different skill sets. Um, it also enables interoperability, right? Between the teams, between the systems, between the networks, you kind of get that single pane of glass view out of leveraging technologies like this, so that you can enable a single team, if needed, to really manage all of this, which goes right into the ease of use and deployment. And then there's the idea of backwards compatibility. We've encountered this recently where some organizations, I don't know why, I won't name the organizations, but some organizations are still running on, SQL Server 2000 or 2010. I've seen some stuff that's older, but how do you support those? and fortunately for us, right, we've done the engineering, the hard engineering work already, and we're able to go back to those, you know, older systems, if you will, including, you know, mainframes and all those great things. And so this is the drawing that, again, in the interest of time, I won't get too detailed here, but essentially, when you fully deploy PKWARE and all of our solutions, we're all familiar with CDE, right? The card data environment, which is the blue square here in the center. And maybe that includes one or multiple clouds. Maybe it includes your on-prem data center. It's got everything from servers to databases to file shares to endpoints, right? Whatever those might be. And you're aware that those are all in your scope, and that's all good. You'll handle it per, you know, the required controls. But what happens when that card data falls outside of it? Like Heidi mentioned, there's copying of data, you know, there's storage of data on endpoints more now than ever. You know, people are making copies of databases. They're doing all kinds of stuff just to get their job done. So how do you prevent scope creep whenever these types of activities are going on? And that's kind of what the external square here is. By leveraging automated discovery along with those protections that are policy based, when a credit card is detected outside of your defined scope, you could have, you know, a policy set up if you wished that would automatically mask it, meaning it's going to take that credit card from that 16-digit number and maybe it's going to mask it down to an eight-digit number. Maybe it's going to remain 16 digits but not be a credit card. Right? You have a lot of different options here, and along with that protection, you can also do alerting to say, hey, this activity took place, this is happening, take a look at it. Because maybe it's not a problem. Maybe the problem is that someone didn't tell you they expanded your CDE, and that system that you just masked the data in is actually appropriately storing cards, but it needs to be brought in scope to the card data environment, right? And that's really what we're here to help prevent. It's also the number one overhead cost to any PCI assessment is that the concept of scope creep, because you get halfway through the assessment, you find out you've got two other environments that are in scope, and then your QSA starts to question everything you've told them, and they start poking holes in different places, and essentially the assessment seems to drag on forever. I know we've all been there. Getting towards the end, this goes back over to Heidi.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Chris. So I think as we think about meeting compliance for PCI, as we think about automating as much as we can in different parts of our program, it's a key takeaway here is to shift your thinking from approaching compliance as this point in time, pass the audit, score the goal type of thing. It really needs to move to this thinking of sustained compliance. So something that is in perpetual motion, like this kinetic energy ball machine. The ball just keeps moving and it keeps going and going because all the right things are in place and set up in place to enable it to keep moving and just not stop. So how do we get there? How do we get on this path to sustained compliance? A couple of takeaways here. Foster strong alignment between the business and security when it comes to data governance and protection. So what this means is that you end up securing what the business needs in order to do business, and you're all moving in the same direction together. You end up protecting what matters, and you increase both data and security awareness of your entire workforce. Establish oversight, accountability structures, this whole who does what, like the whole RACI chart thing. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's supporting, who's consulted, who's informed when it comes to different aspects of the efforts that you are putting in place for compliance. So all of this is not just actions that is the work of the security team or IT or a group that's focused on compliance. Your employees, your stakeholders that understand data security and privacy risk, this is everybody in the organization. They need to understand and assess the business impact of what it is that they're doing and have this shared responsibility as a company. Prioritize your discovery, your classification efforts. This is really your foundation. You need to know what it is that you're trying to protect. So then you can go on and maintain consistent data security controls no matter where this data resides, whether it's on premises, in the cloud. And so to do this, you really need that clear reasoning, behind your decisions and the choices of controls that you're making based on things like data location, data type, the sensitivity or the classification of this data. And we also saw this when it came to organizations preparing for privacy regulations like GDPR, those who were on this much more efficient path to compliance and sustained compliance and had these more mature privacy programs in place, they were able to develop these harmonized approaches when it came to data security across various environments.
And I think just wrapping up too, we have a couple of Q&A here. Really what all of this comes down to, right, is the proactive approach versus a reactive approach. Since 2016, when GDPR was announced, right, it really heightened the need for proactive, to be proactive. And since then, technology has really been building in that direction. So now it's time now for management and engineers and architects to really sit down and think about, well, how do we incorporate this technology into our day-to-day procedures to make sure that when we're building that new project, right, security and privacy come first and they're built in, right? So that's kind of the goal and intention of all of this.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Chris and Heidi. It's fantastic. We do have a few questions that are already posted, but before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that these slides will be added to the handouts window of your GoToMeeting control panel, which you can download at any time as we move into the Q&A section of our webinar. Also, if you have not submitted any questions, please do so now over in the questions window in your control panel. With that now, let's begin some Q&A. We have time for just a couple questions. So first question we have, and I think Heidi, this one's right up your alley. Is manual data classification obsolete? What if we already have invested some into tools to support some user-driven data classification?
Ooh, okay. That's a good one there. Is it obsolete? I would say no, it's not. I mean, you don't see it as much anymore with so much automation that's getting built into various tools. But if you've already invested in these tools, I think they still serve a really good purpose. I mean, part of the reason why companies were relying on this manual or the user-driven data classification is so that they could have greater confidence in this labeling, this tagging, because this may have been data or files that really needed a human eye to verify that, yes, this was super sensitive, this was something that uh, maybe the technology that they had just wasn't so great at identifying.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I think the amount of data that's just generated now, per minute is so much greater than what it used to be, that doing things manually just has become, extraordinarily onerous to get it done right.
Mm. And I think there's room for both. Like oftentimes in solutions, you'll see some combination, but increasingly, I think as your data volumes are growing, the reliance on the automated is going to come up more and more. But it's a question of confidence that you have in those results.
Yeah, I guess we're never going to get into full automation. We're always going to need to do some double checking and auditing, aren't we?
Yeah, some verification, some quality checks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and let's see. Here's one that I think would be good for you, Chris. Let's see. Today we leverage DLP for data discovery and monitoring to a degree. What advantages would a solution such as PKWARE provide over DLP, or how are the two different?
No, it's a good question. So DLP, we all know, has been around for many years, and it was really born and bred off of regular expressions. I'm aware of this 10-digit or 15-digit number or this particular word or something that I want to go track. And DLP is great for that. It's great for making sure that that data doesn't end up somewhere it shouldn't be. Unfortunately, any organization I've ever worked in, or worked with has always used DLP as a glorified data monitoring tool, if you will, because the false positive rates are so astronomically high they're afraid to enable enforcement because it will break the business. Right? It's this balancing scale between security and business, because if you just lock everything away and throw away the key, you're not going to make any money. With PKWARE, it's one thing that we pride ourselves on is that our discovery capabilities are, over 95, upwards of 97% accurate just out of the box. And then of course you can tune and adjust that to get it even higher and really enable the ability to use things like masking and encryption, et cetera, without breaking the business. We tend to be a lot more lightweight. We work in a lot more different systems. Uh, DLP is also not great in databases. I know it's there now, but it's, would I trust it? No. So, and beyond that, right, PKWARE is this all-in-one discovery, masking, encryption, classification, as well as a privacy solution, quite frankly, if you need one, to do things like DSARs or PIAs or DPIAs, really to hone in on those risk assessments. We enable you to really be able to ask the harder questions internally that software can't help with, which is the why do you have this data? What's the intention of it? Where did it come from? Right? No technology can really help you with that this day and age. So PKWARE helps you ask those questions more clearly and more educatedly, if you will.
All right, it's great information, and thanks. I think right now we're at the top of the hour, so in the interest of time, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to discuss today's topic with us. The speakers both did a wonderful job. It was very informative. We hope everyone found the same value in the content. Again, we did record the webinar, and we'll send an email with a link to the recording once it's available. If you have any additional questions or would like to speak to us regarding your privacy or compliance efforts, please don't hesitate to contact us online by visiting pkware.com/contact, and we'll put you in touch with the right folks here at PKWARE. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.